Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining the Choice Solutions webinar today. We'll get started in just a minute, but while we wait for people to get logged in, feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom. We can answer either questions live in the Q&A chat, or we will wait till the end if it's a broad enough question. And then at the end of the webinar, you'll be prompted to take a quick 4-question survey. So we really appreciate the feedback and input from you. So again, the Q&A feature, use that to your benefit. We can answer questions live. And then at the end of the webinar, we will send out a survey. It should just be prompted, loaded up in your browser once the webinar concludes. So be sure to stick around for that. Okay, well, it is the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and kick things over to Brian Steinlogge with Choice Solutions.
Hey, good morning, and thank you guys for joining. My name is Brian Steinlogge. I'm one of the partners, and I co-lead up our sales organization here at Choice. So for those of you that are current customers, we thank you for your continued partnership, and it's truly a privilege and an honor to get a chance to work with you and your team. And for those of you who might be prospective, we look forward to just the discussion to talk about some of the amazing technologies that we have the pleasure and privilege to represent, but also to some technology ideas. Today, we're going to be going into secure private access. But real quick, for those of you who aren't familiar with Choice, we're going to do a quick high level. Choice was originally founded by Jim Steinlege, our CEO, on 2 primary principles of doing the right thing and treating others like you want to be treated. So here's a picture of our team. We call it the Choice family, but we got a chance to bring them and their families into Kansas City here early in April and got a chance to celebrate a little bit of our success from last year and really collaborate and grow as a team and an organization. So this is a fraction of our team. It was pretty cool to have them all to be able to come into Kansas City shortly after a Super Bowl victory. Where we serve, Choice has 9 offices, primarily across the Midwest and the Southeast. If you want to give a visualization of maybe the southern tip of South Dakota down to San Antonio, and then over down to the Southeast, which is down into Boca Raton and Fort Lauderdale. But over the last 5 to 7 years, Choice has had the pleasure of working with over 700 plus customers across the 45 different states. And so we're not pursuing business up in the Northwest or out in the West. However, due to the expertise, like you get a chance to talk to Benjamin Crill, one of our architects, as well as Shane Kleinert and Scott Osborne, but the rest of our team, is that sometimes because of that skill, we get brought into opportunities in all these different states if we can bring value and benefit to organizations and partner with them on one of these key technology solutions. And so that's where we are, but primarily we're focused in the Midwest and the Southeast and trying to bring value in the regions that we serve. Really, I guess, what is Choice doing? Is it's really the dichotomy and the tension. And when we're working with our clients, as businesses, they're trying to attract and retain key talent. They're trying to make sure that they do this in a secure manner, but they're trying to also they want to make sure that the solutions and technologies that they provide keep the team members engaged. And then you also look at the other side of that is that you have 4+ generations of technology users. We still got boomers in the market, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and millennials, and all of them using technology differently. They want to be productive. They want to be empowered. They also want high speed, that anywhere access. But most importantly, they want a consistent experience no matter where they're at on how they access that technology. And so we get a chance to work with the technology, our customers, on trying to blend the needs of the business, but also to the needs of the user to maintain productivity and security. Where do we meet these businesses at? All of them are at some point in the cloud transformation. Some of them might have just dipped their toe into it, utilizing maybe technologies like Office 365, or maybe they got some cloud-based backup. Maybe they've been doing some remote access with Citrix for multiple decades, but now they're moving some of those workloads into the cloud utilizing Citrix. But all of them are a different part. But the biggest thing is they're trying to get away from is this complex and costly, that inflex, the 3-tier in the complexity with that, and moving more towards the right with more of a simplified operations, maybe more usage-based consumption that's scalable, flexible, whether that's a private cloud or a public cloud, but also to make sure, most importantly, everything is done through the lens of security. When we're talking to these customers, some of the core tenants, whether they're small or large, they're all struggling with similar things. They're struggling to retain key talent. They're struggling to train that talent. The talent they do have is trying to just keep up to date with day-to-day operations, and then also the limitations of that expertise, and really where should they spend their efforts with those resources, and how should they train them up? And what we do is we come alongside them, and we're working with our architects here. They might be working with them as they're evaluating a new technology investment. Maybe we're helping them analyze maybe some next gen platforms, whether that's on a private cloud, public cloud, whether we're looking at a next gen firewall or security technologies. But we have a team that can help them assess that technology. And then I'm going to jump over clear to the right, and that's just the buying and selling and procurement of hardware and software. But then we go clear to the right with our professional services team, which you get a chance to talk to a couple of architects today. They get a chance to help them with assessing that environment, maybe helping them put together a blueprint, or maybe an architecture environment for that. But then we can also help them as maybe they don't have the resources to deploy that. So we can write scopes of services to help them actually deploy, support, and then as they're rolling that out. And where we've heard from a lot of clients lately over the last 5 to 7 years is the ongoing maintenance. Maybe they have a shortage of resources in a specific time. Maybe it's a short-term augment, or maybe it's a long-term deal. But that's where there's gaps. That's where we have some managed service offerings. So what we can identify is maybe a gap in whether it's a knowledge gap in a skill, or really a gap where they want to focus on their business and not really have to invest in the IT resources. So we bring our team tools and technologies, and we figure out how we can put that into more of an OpEx spend so they can budget accordingly for that. And our team can do the managing, patching, securing, delivering. And some people, we literally fully manage their IT infrastructure. But most importantly, what we're trying to do is just work with them on where are their gaps at, and then how can our team partner with them to help shore that up. And once again, maybe that's a short term, maybe that's a long term, but really come alongside and partner with them. Some of the key technologies we get a chance to work with here. Here's some of the ones we're strategic with: Citrix, Nutanix, and Microsoft, Palo Alto, and Nigel. And so today we get a chance to highlight. We have Benjamin Crill, one of our senior architects, on the line. That he's going to be diving into the technology. Benjamin, I'm going to stop my share there so you can get teed up. But also too, we're going to have Shane Kleinert and Scott Osborne. All of these guys are what they call CTPs, Citrix Technology Professionals. And so Choice has been working with Citrix. Our CEO started working with them back in '93. We've been a platinum business partner since '97. And really had a core focus, and with architects like this helping drive those practices, really evaluating the solutions and how they can make sense for our clients, and really helping them unpack that. So today we have Benjamin Crill, and he's going to help lead us through this exercise. So Benjamin, thanks for joining us.
Crill's coming off mute, but while he does,
there we go.
Say hey. SPA is a hot item for us right now. Crill's obviously your keynote for today, and he's going to do his thing. Shane and I are, just happy to be on here, and we're going to be answering questions in the background as we can, so that Crill continue focus on the content and do what he's doing. So, pleasure to be here. So, thanks.
Same here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity. As Brian mentioned, Benjamin Crill, I'm one of the CTPs here at Choice, along with Shane and Oz. I head up our Great Lakes region, so I'm based just outside of Chicago, and cover everything Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan area. So my background, I've been doing Citrix technology for just over 20 years now. The traditional apps and desktop side is where I come from. So Secure Private Access, as Oz mentioned, is a really hot item. And it's a different way of delivering applications. And so started taking a look at it and really fell in love with it, and see the power that can be had with it as far as how do we deliver applications in a new and different way. So happy to talk with you about that today. So kind of want to start off with a little bit of a thinking exercise to if you're not familiar with what Secure Private Access is, to help try and mold what is it that we're looking at? What are the problems that we're trying to solve here? So want to think about, are you doing any of these things in your environment currently? So one of the common applications in a Citrix environment when we come in and we see is that customers are publishing remote desktop. So I've got a user that is remote. I need to get them access to some app server, admin application, something like that that's inside my corporate network. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to have a desktop in my data center. And then from there, I'm going to log into that. And from that, they can already remote desktop into some other application server. So you've got this user that's remote, and they're essentially having to hop two different ways to get to ultimately what they're trying to get to, whether that's, supporting an application, running reports, whatever that may be. So that's a pretty common one that we see. That might be something that you're doing in your environment. That's something that Secure Private Access can help out with. Another way that customers will do that is a feature called RDP proxy. So rather than hosting desktops and application servers in the data center, you might have a customized appliance. So the NetScaler is something that will do this. So that device sits there and allows end users to log into it. And then from there, they can remote desktop to whatever it is in the internal. But again, we've got some kind of device that we're hosting within our data center solely for the fact of getting that user to something that's internal that we don't want to directly expose out to the internet. Another common thing we see is publishing a browser. So we've got internal web apps, web portals, intranets, things like that we want to publish out to users. We can't make that directly available to the internet. So what we do is, again, same thing. We publish a desktop for a user. We host an application server simply to host a browser so that we can jump from the outside to the inside in a secure fashion. But one of the problems is we've got a browser on the endpoint. So, is there a way that we could leverage that browser on the endpoint to do the same thing that we're doing where we're provisioning additional resources, hosting additional resources in our data center now? And though it's not as common anymore, seeing a full VPN is something we still see. So we're having endpoints have direct access all the way into the data center. So now we've got that full data center potentially exposed to whatever that endpoint is. So even if it's a managed endpoint, if something's happened to that, now we've extended our full network out to that endpoint, and whatever that endpoint has access to is now potentially coming into our network as well. So when we look at what are some of the things that are driving the need to use secure private access, so we want to provide the applications that we have to our end users in an efficient manner, leverage the resources that they have rather than hosting additional resources, but also make it available in a way that's easy and consumable to them. We want to provide access to third parties. So having contractors, third-party folks, business partners that need access to applications and information within our infrastructure, but not wanting to provision them out fully. So if we've got a web app, something like that, that we can give them access to the data in our infrastructure in a secure fashion and in an easy fashion for them. And then mergers and acquisitions is another hot topic for how do we integrate this new company quickly without before we're fully ready to do a full-on merger and bridge all of the IT systems between the two companies. So actually was just having a conversation with a customer yesterday, and this was a big thing. So they're like, we need access to these applications for these users by X date, but a lot of the other infrastructure and system tie-ins aren't going to be ready for a couple other months. So how do we get them access now in a way that is efficient and is secure and gets them while we figure out these other items that have to come into play? So secure private access is actually a suite of different products and solutions that all come together to provide the access that end users need. It's not just a single product. So the one that we'll hear a lot about is the Zero Trust, ZTNA, and Zero Trust is a big buzzword within the market now. And it's just the way that we provide the access to those applications is making sure that the end user proves to us that they have what it needs to access those applications or access those applications in the way they want to, rather than just saying, yep, you're authorized, you can use it. We're now going to do some checks and see, yes, you can use it, but can you use it in the way that you're thinking you want to, or do we need to lock this down based off of other criteria that might be out there? So one of the other features that helps out with that is adaptive authentication. So we can, as the user authenticates, we can take a look at where are they coming from, what is the endpoint that they're using, a number of different factors to say, based off of who you are and where you are and other things, we're going to change what you have to do to authenticate. So we may say you need to have both a username and password as well as MFA, maybe a third factor, depending on where you're coming from, or if you're coming from a trusted device and we can see that you're coming from within the corporate network, maybe we don't need to have you go through all those different steps for authentication because we've essentially proven who you are already. So we can change that authentication mechanism based off of the user, where they are, to, again, get them access to the applications that they want to easily, but also in a secure fashion. Single sign-on to the browser. This is something that Citrix has been doing. This is nothing new, but again, making that easy for end users so that they don't have to continually put in their username, password, and their credentials. They can log in one time and have that pass through to all the applications that they're leveraging. Another new feature that's part of the Secure Private Access suite is the adaptive access and security controls. So similar to what is done at the authentication step, is as users are coming in and as they're leveraging things, we can put controls and security around what they're accessing on an ongoing basis. So again, if we see that they're coming internally, then we can say, yes, you have full access to this application. If we see maybe they're coming outside of our corporate network, we may put some restrictions in. If we see that they're coming outside a geographical region, we may put even additional security controls in. So tailoring that access to give the users what they need while keeping our data safe. Browser isolation is another feature that is part of the Secure Private Access suite. This used to be called the Secure Browser Service. So if there's applications or if there's information that users need access to, but we don't necessarily want that web traffic coming on our network, then we can launch a secure browser that's hosted by Citrix and is in a segmented network. All of that information, once the session is over, gets destroyed and is away. So it isolates that from the user, isolates it from our corporate network, while allowing them to continue on. The enterprise browser is really this is becoming a hot topic within organizations, is how do we control the browser for that user? So a lot of things, almost everything seems to be going to some kind of SaaS-based, and we want to control how that browser experience is. We want to maybe make sure that they are on a certain version, or the version is secured, or there's controls around what they can add in, what they can't add in. So Citrix has put the enterprise browser as part of the Citrix Workspace app. So it's not anything additional that you have to consider and deploy. It's part of what they're already doing for their traditional Citrix applications, but then gives you the ability to control that access. And then with anything related to access, security, and end user experience, we want to be able to take a look at that, see what's going on, help with the end user if there's a problem, make sure that it's working for them. So all of that can get pumped into Citrix Analytics, where we can start getting that visibility to see who's using what, how, make sure that they're having a good experience, make sure that we're controlling the access to our applications properly. So I want to walk through what this looks like from how the end users interact with it. How does it interact with our internal infrastructure? So if we've got a user that they're on their corporate device, they're outside, they're somewhere remote, whether it's working from home, working from a coffee shop, they need access to applications that are inside the corporate network, whether that's an internal web app, whether that's a SaaS-based app that we're restricting to our corporate network, or if it's just a publicly available SaaS app, we can control and deliver all of those applications. So what we do with Secure Private Access is we drop what's called a connector appliance within your corporate network. If you're using Citrix Cloud now and you're used to the cloud connectors, those are Windows-based servers that talk to Citrix Cloud. This is a hardened Linux appliance that is used specifically for Secure Private Access. So that will talk out to the Secure Private Access cloud, as well as talk into your any of the applications that you are hosting or wanting to provide access to, as well as it'll talk to your identity provider if you want to be able to provide that single sign-on experience for the end users. So from their endpoint, they're going to have either or both of the Secure Private Access client and the Citrix Workspace app loaded onto their machine. They're going to go out to the Citrix Cloud URL that is for your company. They're going to use the existing identity that they have. So whether you're using Okta, Azure AD, whatever that is, we can integrate that in with Secure Private Access. So it's not a different new login for the end user. They just continue to use what they do, and based off of where they're coming from, what their username is, what they have access to, then we'll start taking a look at this is what they have access to and start making that available to them through their endpoint. And based off of, again, what they're trying to access, where they're coming from, who they are, we can start to put policies around what is it that they're going to do. So if they're coming from a location that I'm aware of, and I'm okay with, say, we can put geographic borders around things. We can geolocate things and say, all right, cool, you're within the US, so we're going to restrict it down because you're not within the corporate network, but we're going to give you access. If we see that maybe you're coming from something that looks like it's a foreign address that we're not aware of, we may not allow them to have access in that context. So again, the end user is just doing their thing, and then we're taking a look at it and providing that contextual control around the applications. So all this is going to get communicated out to Citrix Analytics. Again, that's the visibility and the monitoring, so you can see what's going on, make sure that we're taking appropriate access. And then also we talked about the remote browser. So if they're in their application and they go to a website or a URL that either we don't know about or we've defined as something that we don't want on our network, we can kick them out to a remote browser so that, again, they can still have access to it, but it's in a secure fashion. And then we can do the same thing from a bring your own device. So their user experience may be different at that point in time, again, because we're taking a look at that. We're saying, okay, I see that you're somebody that I know about, but that device I'm not sure of. So we'll give you access, but again, we're going to put some restrictions on it, or it's going to look a little bit different so that you can do your thing, but we can make sure that we're controlling that access to that data, making sure that it stays secure and within company control. So with that, I want to do a little bit of a demo as far as what this would look like from an end user's perspective and what they can expect to see. So this is my Citrix Workspace app. So nothing really different from what users are expecting to see. I've got some applications here that are published to me. In the background, I've got my standard browser, and this will go into the admin interface in a little bit. But from an end user perspective, I've got applications that are available to me, and I just want to launch it. So let's say I want to go to my company's public website. So I'm going to click on this. It's going to open up in a different browser. In this case, this is the Citrix Enterprise browser. This is just a version of Chromium that Citrix has packaged up with the Workspace app. So you can see I've had access to it. Nothing really looks any different than what they're used to, because this is just, again, this is a public website. Nothing really, sensitive here that I need to protect. So I'm just going to give end users access to that. Let's say I want to go into my CRM and I need to do some, kind of some data entry, look up some information about a customer. This obviously has some information that I want to protect, and I don't want to just give out to users. So here you can see it looks a little bit different. And we've actually got our app protection in. So showing some additional ways that this works. So, and I'm not sure if you're seeing that from the on the webinar side of things, but from my perspective, it's showing up as a blank screen. And this actually is the app protection feature that is coming into play here, because we've defined this as sensitive data. So we're not actually able to see this because we want to protect that information. If we look at one of the other applications, maybe it's just an admin interface. Here we have access to it. And if you can tell a little bit, it's a little light, but we've watermarked this so we can see who it is that's accessing it, and we can see where it is that they're coming from. So again, this is an admin interface that may have some data that I want to make sure doesn't get out there. If something were to happen to it, I want to make sure that I can track that down. So we watermark it, we can see who it was that was doing it. We can see where they were coming from, so we can track that down. We can make sure that we take the appropriate action in response. And then let's, taking a look at if there's an application, if there's a website that we know where we do not want that traffic on our network, then again, we click on that. And it's going to pop up in that enterprise browser. And now what it's doing is it's sending that over into the Citrix cloud to where they're going to host the browser. So it's another browser within a browser, but then all of this web traffic is going to happen on the Citrix network. This isn't going to be on our company network. And so again, we can isolate that and make sure that we have the data that the users need, but we're not putting our company at risk. And then if we have a full-on application that a user needs to get, so a traditional client server application, they can use the secure access client. So this would be an agent that we would load typically only onto a managed device that will provide VPN-like access. So if we say, we were talking about RDP earlier, and we need to provide that to an end user, rather than publishing out a desktop just for them to jump over to another server, we can allow them to do that directly from their endpoint in a secure fashion. So just to show there's no trickery, so we've got this RDP set up, and if I were to try and go to the server right now in RDP, I'm not able to. So eventually it's going to error out here in a second because I don't have access to that. And then once it errors out, so there it errors out. So now if I log in to my secure access client, all right, so I'm in. And now when I try and go to that server, now I'm in. And what we can do is, unlike a traditional VPN where we've, maybe have the entire network that's exposed, we can segment this down to, these are the servers that we're going to allow explicitly. So with the traditional VPN, you're extending the full network, and then you have to put a bunch of firewall rules in to say, well, we want to block this off and we want to block this off. The nice thing with secure private access is that we define this is what we want them to have access to, and that's what they do. So if I were to, say there might be a separate network that is highly secure, we could make sure we don't even define access to that, so they're never going to get to it. So let's look at, from an admin perspective, what that would look like. So all of this is managed through your existing Citrix Cloud tenant. What we're going to focus today on is the cloud version. There is an on-prem version. They are actively working on that. In fact, they have some new tools to help out with the provisioning and management that were just released today. So take a look at the Citrix blogs. It'll show you kind of what the difference is between the on-prem. We're going to focus on the cloud for today. So as we're looking in our Citrix Cloud tenant, we come into our secure private access. We can start off by looking at the dashboard. This is just going to give you a good overview as far as what's going on in the environment, who's accessing what, are there problems. Let's zoom this in a little bit. So we can see that, we have good amount of app access. We're seeing a little bit of failures. This is actually me doing some testing this morning and actually specifically making it fail, but we can isolate that down and we can filter it down and see that, the server wasn't available for a period of time. Maybe that's still ongoing and we could take a look at that. But we can take a look at, dig into who's accessing what, when are they doing that, making sure that, again, we're providing the access to the users in an appropriate fashion without giving them too much, and making sure that they're not doing something that we didn't intend for them to do. Secure private access ties into your existing authentication mechanisms. So whether that you're doing adaptive authentication for that, higher level of granularity when your users are authenticating, whether it's just using your standard Azure AD or Okta, whatever it is, it's just going to leverage what you've already got there. So nothing you have to do extra from that perspective. We talked about device posture and taking steps based off of what the device is and whether or not we determine that that's a managed device or not. So if you're an Intune customer, this is a relatively new GA feature where you can take the information that Intune provides as far as determining whether or not this is a managed, whether this is a compliant device, and we can take that information and just leverage that from the secure private access. So you don't actually have to do anything new or different. You just leverage what's already been set up in your environment and say, well, if Intune says you're compliant, then I'm going to say you're compliant as well. And we move on from there. Otherwise, we can set up specific scans. So whether it's a Windows device or a Mac OS device, we can create a policy and based off of different rules and criteria. So if we've said, if they haven't checked their updates in the last 5 days, then we may deem them as non-compliant. And then any of our policies for non-compliant devices would then apply. Or, again, based off the criteria, we can deny them access, determine that they're compliant, and again, give that granularity based off of what we're seeing come from the endpoint as well as from what the end user is telling us. So if you're familiar with, applications from CVAD environment, so apps and desktops, so we're going to, similar here, here's where we're going to define our applications, whether that's a web application or whether that's a client server application. So we were looking at RDP here. You can see we've got those RDP. Here's where we define, those are the networks that we can get to, or what is it that makes up that application, whether it's a file sharing application, whether it's, it might be a client server application where you need access to a database. So we can define, here's the networks that they can get to, here's the ports that they can get to, rather than, kind of having to take it from the other approach where we say everything's opened up and now we need to restrict it down. Secure private access takes it, so you tell us what they need to get access to, and that's the only thing that they're going to see and be able to reach out to. So taking a look at a couple of these applications. So this one, whether or not we set this up as an application that's inside my network or outside my network will change the options that we have available to us. So in this case, let's say that it's just a standard HTTP application. In this case, we're going to provide access to ChatGPT. So we define that as something that we're saying is within our network. We can define our single sign-on. So based off of what we have already, we can provide that access to the application without requiring the user to sign in again. So whether that's SAML authentication, Kerberos, whatever it may be, or we may say, specifically for that application, we don't want it to have SSO, and we can restrict that down as well. And then we show how is it that we want this application to be routed. So we can say that it's going to go internal. So obviously for any kind of internal only based app, we're going to have it come in through the connector. We can have it come internal, but say there's a proxy server that it has to go through. If the application has issues with the proxy, we can have it come through the through the connector appliance, but not go through the proxy. And then we can choose specifically which connector appliances. So if we have multiple locations, we can route it through the appropriate connector that we want to have it go through. So we're making sure that we're not doing extra hops and having some fun routing on the network side of things. And then if we look at, this is if it's considered an external application. So similar thing, ChatGPT, now we're going to treat that as though it's outside the organization. It will change up some of the SSO capabilities that we have because, again, this is outside of our corporate network. So we're not going to have our AD or internal authentication mechanisms, we're going to want something that's publicly available, similar to our Azure AD, Okta, some kind of SAML assertion that we can send to it, rather than trying to extend our internal network. And then here we can choose that it's external. So what it's going to do is it's not going to route that through the cloud connector. So when an end user connects to that application and then they launch it, they're going to go direct there. So, think of applications like Office 365 that are publicly available. You can just send those users direct to it so that, you don't have that additional traffic coming internally, but you still have the ability to control that access. And if we look at the policies, this is where we're going to say, this is how you access it. This is, how we want you to, the controls that we want to put around this. So if we take a look at the web applications that we had before, so a newer feature is being able to put multiple rules within an existing policy. So up till about, I want to say it was about a month ago when this came out, you would have to do multiple policies if you wanted to have different criteria. Now you can say, this is the policy for my application, and we can put multiple rules inside of that. Makes it a little bit cleaner to manage that and show that off. So if we say, we were looking at our Nutanix interface before, if we say that they are one of our Citrix admins, or whatever the user group is, here's where we're going to define this is what we have access to or what they don't have access to. So we saw that the username and our public IP address where we are coming from, that's this display watermark. This restrict key logging and restrict screen capture. This is how we can make sure that they have access to it, but they're not going to be able to pull anything off of that. We may, restrict printing and downloads. So again, same thing, they can access the data, they can do what they need to, but if maybe they're coming from a device that we don't know about, or maybe it's a corporate device that there's an issue and we're not totally sure what's going on with it. It hasn't checked in within Intune for a while, so we're not sure that it's compliant. We might have them come down and hit this rule because we're saying you're not fully compliant. We're going to give you access, but you're essentially just going to be able to interact with the application within the browser. You're not going to be able to pull any data. This open and remote browser, that's where, again, if this is an application that has some risk or you don't want that to be within your network here, checking that open and remote browser, that's what allows it to tell it, hey, go out to the secure browser service, launch that, and have that run within the Citrix cloud. Again, they host it, that browser is there, it's only up for that session. When the user logs off, that session gets terminated and all that data just goes away. So if you have something, if you have to do some research, one of the customers I had, they had to do some research based off of some competitive information against companies that were based in Russia, Ukraine. This is something that they were looking at for remote browsers so that we can give users access to that. But again, we don't put that on our network. We don't have that access on our devices. And then for the TCP UDP app, these are your client server apps. Again, similar things based off of where they're coming from, who they are. Do we want to allow them access to that? Don't we want to allow them access to that? So if we've got, say, a database application and I see that they're coming in from their home, I may allow that. If I see that they're, maybe they're traveling, they went on vacation and they're trying to access that, and maybe they're across seas, maybe I don't allow that in that instance. So we can put all of those policies and controls into those applications to provide the end users their access without giving them more access than they need. So I have thrown a lot of information at you guys. That's everything from a demo perspective. Do we have any questions that are out there right now?
Yeah, Crill, we had a couple. One of them was about requirements and compatibility, and Mac and Windows, as far as my understanding, I answered that one as really the only clients, because the SAP client being one piece of this. is only for Mac and Windows that I know of. And then even the CWA published stuff through Workspace with SPA only mentions Mac and Windows. So really that's the primary use case on the endpoint is Mac and Windows that I know of.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another one here about licensing. So if I have DAS, do I have this? How is it licensed? What do we look like there as far as entitlements go?
Sure. So right now, SPA is all separate. So there's no DAS there's no DAS license level that would include SPA. So so it would be licensed separately. It would still integrate within your existing Citrix Cloud tenant if you're an existing DAS customer, but it would be licensed separately. But it would also be something that you could look at. Do maybe I use some more secure private access? I might be hosting some applications and some app servers and some desktops and paying licenses for there. I might be able to, again, move some of that access that we're hosting a full-on desktop for over to secure private access, be a little bit more cost effective, as well as streamline the end user experience.
Yeah, it is interesting to note there are 2 variations to SPA with the standard, but we don't do much with the standard version because it's just what SSO is the only component of that. So what Crill's showing here today is the advanced feature set with SPA. So,
correct.
Yeah, has all the bells and whistles and stuff that he was showing today.
Correct. Yeah. The standard version. It's limited. It certainly could provide in certain situations, but it is rather limited. So the advanced is really what we see most of our customers looking at.
Yeah, we are seeing it's very good value for the price point. So if you can offload some stuff from a regular Citrix license, for example, and hitting your hosts and killing your density on your hosts for maybe some video or some of those things you're doing, and utilize this type of license, it's a really good as far as the price point. It's really nice compared to a full license.
Yeah, and if you think about too, like I mean, a lot of this functionality early on, right? The Citrix did a great job extracting the complications from, remember, Unified Gateway and all the promotions around doing RDP proxy, Unified Gateway, and SaaS apps all through the NetScale. They simplified all that, created those awesome wizards that you saw there, and the great interface that Crill was showing. Make it easier for customers to take advantage of that functionality without having all the complications of doing it on the NetScaler and having to own that device internally, right? Being able to just have those cloud connector appliances, in your data center and securely traverse it, have that traffic traverse it outbound only, which is nice. So you're not looking at inbound holes in the firewall to allow all this traffic in. So I think it's really powerful. Crill, one question came in specifically around, why would you, it's a good question, why would you, use this over just doing what people traditionally do, right? People traditionally publish RDP, as an icon, or they, publish like Edge or Chrome with their browser, right? And so why would they do different? I think that was a good question.
Yeah. So, and Oz mentioned it just a second ago. One of the reasons is some of that offloading for if you've got a graphic intensive application, if you're doing videos within your websites, trying to play that in a remoted session can just kill it. And essentially you're having to scale your data center infrastructure to play a video on an endpoint that may have its own graphics capability there and certainly has a browser capability there. So why not just give them direct access to it? That way you're not having to do, essentially, by hosting it in your data center, you have to do twice the cost because you've paid for that endpoint, and now you're having to pay for infrastructure within your data center to, again, play that video. So if we can move that from our data center to the endpoint, that would be one way of doing it. And then just in general, being able to leverage the investment that we've made in endpoints. I mean, when the pandemic hit, people were buying laptops, like crazy. And now if you think about that, now you've got all these laptops that are out there, and how do we want to, let's leverage them as best as possible and use the resources that are there. There may still be reasons to keep that browser within the data center. So if you have, an application that needs a specific version of the browser, that maybe is older, has some security holes into it, we may want to keep that version within a data center and host that within our Citrix environment so we can essentially isolate that off. But our endpoints, we want them to be on a modern browser that's patched, so we can then just take those applications and let them run those on their endpoint and keep the hosted resources within our data center focused on some of those things that we need to have a little bit more restrictions around.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, another question came in about specifically about the app protection, which you kind of showed intentionally, unintentionally, whatever. But it's nice. App protection is a nice feature within DAS, and specifically, does the key logging protection apply to both vApps and vDesktops for BYOD home users? And I can take that too if you need.
Does it apply to, I guess,
both apps and desktops as far as computer groups, which it certainly can. From that perspective, for traditional, what's nice about SPA, I'll just provide from the advanced with the SPA advanced license, you get app protection included with the licensing there. On the DAS side of the house, for traditional delivery groups for apps and desktops, as Crill mentioned, SPA is not included in any fashion there, right? Except for maybe if you were like an old workspace bundle client customer, you can see it under your licensing. So we're seeing that a little bit as customers transition off. It was included because it used to be called Secure Workspace Access. It was rebranded into SPA later on, but it used to be included with that workspace bundle stuff. Now with the universal or DAS licensing, it is not, but you may get lucky if you go in your licensing, if you were workspace bundle, anything premium plus, you're going to see SPA underneath your licensing SKU when you go up to DAS, and you might be able to just turn it on and start playing around with it. Now, if you straight out of the gates as DAS, or universal, then no, you won't have it. And then you'll be able to use app protection only if you were premium or premium plus, and then that it's an add-on as well, but that does then apply to both apps and desktops for a delivery group.
Yeah, and if you've got those workspace bundles out there, or even if you just want to take a look at it, we've got jumpstart services available where we can help you get this up and going in a quick fashion. Leverage those licenses that you have, or leverage a trial license for it to see, get used to it. How might we deliver some of those web SaaS apps differently? Our client server apps, can we deliver them in a different fashion than we did before as well?
Yep.
So Crill, another question specifically is, if you're an on-prem CVAD customer, would you be able to leverage the SPA functionality?
So there is on-prem version of SPA. It's still it's a little bit more complicated than the cloud service because you are working through setting up the NetScaler gateways, integrating it with your Citrix storefront. So there is a little bit more work that needs to be done around it. I mentioned earlier, Citrix just put out a new tool that helps streamline that, make it a little bit easier. So if you do have that, you might, if you're a customer that, you have to, your network or your security folks say, I have to control that traffic. I need to see where it's coming in, where it's going out. I need my other security devices around where that network's routing. Then the on-prem version is something that you could leverage there. And certainly they're doing a ton of development and making it, streamlining the on-prem version so it's not as cumbersome. Like you saw the cloud version. I mean, I come from a traditional apps and desktops background. I'm not a security guy. I'm not a networking guy by trade. And I was able to dig into SPA and get it up and running and mess around with it in hours. So they're getting to that point with the on-prem version. Just right now, it takes just a little bit more work up front than the cloud version.
Yep, and I'm not 100% certain. We were kind of having a discussion in the background. If you're on-prem term versus perpetual, the old perpetual model versus on-prem term, there may be some different entitlements there that you're privy to on that side. Can't remember.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah,
I'd have to look that up from a licensing perspective.
yeah. Same with like Web Studio and all the stuff they are bringing to on-prem term customers. It's really nice what they're refocusing there, and SPA was something they wanted to get quickly out of the gates in GA for that purpose. Let's see what any other questions. Shane, is there anything else you can see?
Yeah, I'm checking.
Oh yeah, how is this different from BCR? Like other offloading techniques, like browser content redirection, for example, and where would you use this over that, for example?
Sure. So browser content redirection is still going through, you're still having that hosted infrastructure within your data center, and then you're just taking the content that's being rendered in the browser and offloading that to the endpoint. In this, with SPA, there's no connection to a hosted resource within the data center. The endpoint is connecting to the secure private access. The connector appliance is telling it where to go. Everything is happening on the endpoint. So from that perspective, you could have SPA, you could be just an SPA customer. If all you have is web apps, then you don't even need to have DAS. You could just do SPA. So that's the difference. So for browser content redirection, you might have applications that are within that desktop, and those are going to get rendered and leveraged on the desktop itself. And then the browser pieces, you can offload those to the endpoint. SPA, it's all on the endpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, the BCR, you're still using a DAS license, so any of those users utilizing that are using the much higher priced DAS license and burning that out of your DAS environment versus the SPA license. And we do have another live question, actually. Are most customers who are using SPA in a hybrid scenario? Because we might be strictly cloud-based in Azure, would that still be viable?
Yeah, I can't see.
Yes, hybrid scenarios versus just public cloud. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and it's definitely work. It's like they do have a connector specifically for Azure, right? And we have a customer just recently, the other day actually, that just deployed them over in Azure. We're able to get the connectors there. So think of, if it's a pure Azure scenario, it's like having your own data center, right? So it's the same scenario. It's an IaaS solution from that perspective. So it's not only on-prem. I work fine in Azure, AWS.
Connector appliance can go either. So, and you will hear different terminology. Well, you probably heard him mention the connector appliance versus cloud connector. Cloud connector is what you're familiar with today with the DAS environment infrastructure versus the connector appliance, which is a hardened, streamlined appliance for you just download and import. I think that was the last question.
Okay.
Or as I can tell.
Yeah, it looks like that's the last one.
Outstanding. I guess we can start bringing this to wrap here. Like I said, the Crill, thank you for sharing out with the group, and Oz and Shane, thanks for the commentary. I guess to the audience here and or to customers, if any of these topics covered, maybe even piqued an interest or a possible area of need, reach out to your choice account manager. We'd love to have, like I said, get on a quick 15 to 20 minute call to see one. Crill shared that we do have some jump starts for people who want to stand this up in a pilot to do some testing out, kind of we always look at it as a crawl, walk, run, or also too, maybe just get on and we can help you unpack. There's a lot of changes taking place at Citrix. And so don't hesitate. We'll get on and kind of unpack what the licensing have, what the features you have access to. Our whole goal as a partner is to make sure that you're getting the most value for the investment you've already made before we're looking to another investment with additional licenses. So sometimes there's feature sets that you've already paid for within those bundles or different things like Oz referenced that we want to make sure that you're getting the full value and access to. And then just a matter of how we can help you along that process. So thank you guys. Like I said, we consider it a true privilege and honor for you guys to learn more about the solutions, our company and organization. And like I said, we appreciate the partnership and business. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close out. We wish you the best and have an awesome day.